Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here after lunch. That lunch, I think, was the best lunch I've had at a conference. Who agrees? Thank you. It really was. So I'm here today to talk to you about forms. Yes. So a little bit of background. My name is Julie. Once again, I'm a senior UX designer for Bronto, which is an e-commerce marketing platform that was recently purchased by Oracle. So previously, I was in public relations, and about 10 years ago, fell in love with web design and development, and that has since morphed into user experience. So please feel free to find me afterwards. I love chatting and networking, and just really thrilled to be here with y'all in New Zealand. Okay, so why do we care about forms? Well, forms are the linchpin to all online interactions. Forms are important for registration, for revenue, to grow our community, and participation in sharing, and any task that requires entering information. So just think, there would be no cat videos on YouTube without a form, or none of us would be here at this conference without registering for the conference using a form. They're incredibly important to our interactions with life. So Luke Walborowski, who's the kind of grandfather of web form design, said that web forms are often the last and most important mile in a long journey. And this really resonated with me, because I can tell you previously, I was working in an agency where we were doing Drupal websites, and as the information architect and UX designer, I was doing a lot of things, and mostly kind of our forms went something like this. About 2-3 days before launch, somebody would say, Julie, do we have a contact form? And I'd go, oh shit, I forgot the contact form. So I would end up then having to enable the web form module or remind a developer to put the web form module in the site and just kind of throw it together. So Luke's quote really rang true, and for me personally, which is why I started researching really how can I make the best and most effective form. So how much do we think a bad form can cost you? Well, I mean, the real answer is priceless, right? But I can tell you that for Expedia, it was about $12 million. They found that users were going on the site, entering their travel information, going through the whole process, and then clicking buy now, but not completing the transactions. This was happening countless amount of times. So what's up with that? Well, it turns out that they had a field under first name, last name for company. And users were entering on the billing, this is on the billing screen. So users were entering their company, entering their bank account, like their bank name in the company field, and then entering their bank address in the address field. So credit card transactions were failing because, of course, the address was the bank address and not like their actual home address that the credit card company knew. So after doing a little bit of research, they realized if they just removed that company field, transactions increased overnight, and over the course of that year, they earned an additional $12 million in revenue. So y'all, this is all because of one form field. And the thing is that UX designers and professionals in this industry, we know better. Studies have shown that forms that follow basic usability guidelines are faster to complete and almost twice as likely to be submitted without errors. So, and our challenge is that forms are annoying. They're a thing in between the person and what they're looking for. They're that thing you have to go through to get something, right? So it's a blocker often to something else, why someone would even go through the form. And forms really have lasting consequences. I can tell you that my friend Missy works in DC as someone. I was telling her I was coming to the conference to talk about forms, and in my research I've been thinking more about forms, and she said, let me tell you about a form. So she works with folks who are on disability and who are getting back to work. So she was with a client one day, and they were filling out a form for the client to work at the local Harris Teeter, which is a grocery store chain in the United States. And Harris Teeter had recently redesigned their website. So they're filling out the form, name, information, your basic online application. And in this state field, they were in Virginia. She entered VA, which is the state abbreviation for Virginia, and they got an error message. So they went back, and the client said, maybe we need to type out VIRGINA, and still got an error message. So they actually quit. They left, and that client of hers left feeling like he was not smart enough to work at Harris Teeter. And that is actually our fault. That's our fault as designers, developers. That's someone who should have been QAing that site and missed it. So it's just important to remember that these decisions are things that we often forget about really can affect people. So here's an application form for an online for job to work at Ladybird, and this is horrible. Imagine trying to go through this. Here's an online application. Everything is required. It's painful. Here's an online application. I've got a select list that has every type of every type of job, but it actually doesn't have my job in it, so I don't know what to fill out. All right, so now we're going to talk about what makes an effective form. So you might say, well, Julie, one that follows usability guidelines, like we talked about earlier, and I'd say you're 100% correct. But for today, we're going to focus on 3 guiding principles, which is to reduce cognitive load, to help prevent errors, and to make it human. Okay, so reducing cognitive load means that we want to, to me, it means we want the form to be scannable and have feelings of simplicity. So first off, we're going to talk about labels. A label is the thing that is in red here, circled. Now, we know that top-align labels are best for faster form completion times. This is because it's easier to scan and the reduced amount of eye movement needed when going through the form. So it's always best to have top-align labels. It's also important to have your label close to the input box because that way the eye visually knows they're tied together. I also like to recommend not to use all caps because it can feel like you're screaming at someone, and that's not cool. Additionally, it's really important that we don't use inline labels. Does anyone want a reminder about inline labels? Basically, inline labels are when you have a form field and the label for that form, like username, is in the form box itself. The problem with using inline labels are that once someone clicks in the form, their instructions go away. And we don't remember things as humans, we just don't. So someone's got to click out again. It's making someone work harder. We're not helping them reduce the cognitive load. Also, inline labels, someone can think it's already filled out, so you just kind of skip it. And according to an eye tracking study from Norman Nielsen, not inline labels, like blank fields are actually more recognizable and draw the eye's attention more than inline labels. So remember our labels, top aligned. Okay, let's use sequential buttons. What I mean by this is put the primary action on the right and the secondary action on the left. So if you want someone to submit, put it on the right. If you want them to go to the next screen, put it on the right. Like in this example, we're going to delete. That's like what someone is intended to do. So it depends on your situation, what your primary action is. The reason why I say this is because this follows most of our mental models about which direction to go. So on the right is typically next. Think about your web browser, like the buttons at the top. Back is always left. So I think this just helps the form be easier to fill out if we know as designers, what we want people to do, put it on the right side. Cool? Oh yeah, don't use reset. That just should never be a thing, ever. All right, also, let's make our forms one column. This is for scannability and readability. And this includes radio buttons and checkboxes. Also, this is awesome if you, of course, have a responsive presence as well, because it's already aligned as it should be. All right, so now let's talk about options and select list, drop down. So if you have, it's recommended, our brain can kind of absorb about 5 things at one time. So if you have a select list, let's say you have 5 options. If you want to actually show all those words on the page. If you have between 6 and 26, you can put those in a select list. But if it's more than 26, try and use contextual search. All right, another way we're going to reduce cognitive load is to match our field length to estimated text size. So in this example, expiry date, that's like month, year, that makes sense. Zip or postal code is a little too big here, in my opinion. But even though I work with a visual designer, and he'll say, but Julie, it's not lined up properly. And I'll say, I don't care. Like, someone's going to think that they might be messing something up. Or it's like, if we know how long something needs to be, that's as long as the text, the field input size should be, right? Okay, and let's group related information in our forms. This is basically applying content strategy to your form. So, we know how to do this. Put things together that make sense together. Once again, I know you know how to do this. All right, use pre-fills when you can. Pre-fills are like hooking into Google APIs to help bring in an address, or if you're asking for someone's email, when someone uses the @ sign, then maybe prompting them up with @gmail.com or Hotmail, etc. So this is just another helpful way to get someone through their form. Okay, also we want to show progress. This is especially helpful on longer forms. Give someone context for where they are and different steps. Gives them a good sense of place, and this is typically pretty good for onboarding as well. Okay, we also want to add attributes for usability purposes. So let's say if an attribute is a piece of code that you put in your form or your developer puts in your form that it's basically saying, like, I know what you're going to put in, so I'm going to help you with that. So, for instance, if you know it's going to be a telephone number, you can put in the attribute tel, which if you're on a mobile device, that's how the number keypad pops up instead of the alphabet keypad. So this is just another way we can help people. Okay, and input masks also are important for reducing cognitive load. This is just helping people format. So if you know it's going to be a telephone number or a credit card number, this is like allowing that little dash and the parentheses to be there so the user does not have to fill those out. And doing them right is key. It's also important that these aren't going to really show up unless you're on focus as well. All right, so that was, once again, I'm going through a lot of things on how to go through a form, but that was how we can help reduce cognitive load. But now we're going to talk about how to help prevent errors. And this is the practice of basically putting up a fence, like helping people not make errors, exactly what it sounds like. Okay, first off, field validation. So we want to specify errors in line, and we want to validate items per field. This is an example from mint.com. I thought they did it really well. They had nice, clear context. They had nice examples for me, nice descriptions for what I was doing wrong, for telling me, like, hey, this is what you can be doing. We all know how frustrating is it after you've filled out a form and then push submit and then get your sea of errors. This is slowing us down and making someone not get to that thing they're hoping to get to at the end of the form. Also, with this, it's important that we don't show inline validation on focus. We want to show it on blur. So that means don't wait till someone clicks in the input. Like, we don't want to, once you click in, you want to wait till they click out to show the error message, if there is an error message. Because if you do it on focus, which I see sometimes, it's like you're basically yelling at someone before they've even tried to fill it out. It's like saying, hey, you've done this wrong and you haven't even tried yet. It's just really a negative experience. Okay, so we want to leave select list blank. So this is because select lists are really easy to skip, and if you're scanning a form, if people are scanning a form and it's already filled out, or let's say there's a default, if it's an alpha order list and the default is A, whatever that is for you, chances are that someone's just going to skip that and not change it. So this is making someone basically potentially give an error or an answer that they might not have meant to give. So static values are really easy to skip, and when it's blank, similar to what we talked about earlier, when it's blank, it's actually more obvious to someone that they need to fill it out. However, if you know that 90% of your users are going to choose one option, you can use a smart default in that case. So for instance here, I think they were using geolocation to know that I was in the United States, so they were able to say, hey, okay, we're going to pre-populate United States for you. But in general, it's always better to leave select list blank if you don't have that kind of data. Okay, so help text. Sometimes you need additional, like, hey, here's what we mean by this when you're in your form, which is completely fine. It's recommended to put help text underneath the field box. Luckily, for anyone who works with Drupal sites, this is how Drupal does it natively, so it's nice. Okay, so it's also nice to differentiate button styles. We are kind of similarly to our making them sequential. The primary, let's make it more visually obvious. Let's say, okay, this is big, this is bright, this is what we want you to be doing or we anticipate you doing. Once again, I think one of the most frustrating experiences I personally have had is to fill out a form and then accidentally push the wrong button, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about how to make forms human. Because forms really are kind of it's like conversation almost that you're having with someone. And it's a really impersonal thing. Like there's absolutely often there's no customization to it. And there's, they can be really dry. But let's remember that there's actually a person on the other side of this form who's filling it out. So as designers, it's important that we make our forms as human as we possibly can. So now we're going to talk about some tips on how to do that. Okay, similar to what Ka was talking about this morning, we want clear and simple language and call to actions. So it's important to do your user research, know who your users are, and speak to them in a language that they understand. Labels and buttons should clearly explain what they're doing and be written for the user. So in this example, I was looking at a snowboard on Burton.com, and I said, oh, sure, I'll sign up for your newsletter. I really liked how they said, I'm interested in gear for men, women, or kids in the form. That was a really friendly way to say, hey, in the future, how should we market to this person? Also, we want to limit typing. Don't make people work any harder than they need to. We wouldn't do that in real life. We don't want to do it on a form either. Okay, and we want to make it accessible. Web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of removing barriers that prevent interaction with or access to websites by people with disabilities. And if a website or app is designed, developed, and edited with accessibility in mind, then all users have access to the same information and functionality. And sites and apps that are designed accessible are actually better for everyone. Kind of accessibility practices is one of those things that once you do it, you find a lot of hidden benefits as well. For instance, ramps aren't just only used by people in wheelchairs, strollers and people with bad knees, on crutches, or just someone who prefers to take a ramp and not the stairs. Right? So there's a lot of hidden benefits in accessibility, and it's incredibly important with forms as well. There's a lot written about how to do this on W3C, and really, if you just code a form in a clean way, it will be accessible. It's better for everyone. Okay, and we want to value our users' time. Amanda mentioned earlier, if it's only $10, she's not going to do it. We want to make sure we are valuing someone's time as they're inputting, they're there on the form, they're taking their time out. We want to really think about the questions we're asking. So in this example, I was redesigning the giving form for Duke University, and this is the old form. And I said, it was really long, a lot of stuff. Like, this is actually only the second half of the form in the screenshot. I couldn't fit the whole thing where y'all would be able to read it. And this box, enter any comments you have concerning your gift designations, maximum 1,000 characters. Nobody was doing anything with this text box. Like, so people were people were just entering things like, say hi to Bob for me, or go Duke. And it wasn't, that data wasn't actually going anywhere. So we removed that. Also, with our user research, we learned with alumni dues, we could remove that from the redesign. We could remove that from the new iteration because it wasn't just alumni who were coming to the form. It was people who were also giving because they really liked the basketball team. So it's just really important to make sure we think about who is going to be on this form and do we really need to ask that, because I want to make sure I value their time, just as you would in real life. Okay, and also consider the context. Like, people are going to be filling out forms in all sorts of different places. So when we want to think about where is someone going to most likely be. Social situations matter, and it includes forms as well. So if you are, let's say, a car insurance form, you want to make a claim on your car insurance, there's a possibility that someone's filling out that form right after they had their accident on the side of the road. So you want to make sure you think about color contrast, and is the text big enough, and are you using language that empathizes with that? Might be a really scary moment for that person, right? Or if you're sick, if it's a form to maybe request a visit at a doctor's office, that person could be sick when they're filling out the form, so you want to make it really clear about what to do and make it as easy as possible, because situations matter. Okay, and once again, clear call to actions. And this is, right here, I'm really talking about buttons, because it's important to remind people why they're filling out the form. This is an airline in the US called Delta, and like the button says find flights, which I just thought was really clear, and I liked that it was reminding me why I was filling out this form, not just submit or go, let's say. This is also good for accessibility. Like if you have a home page and you have like a couple news snippets, and then you want to say more news, like you want to show more news and go to your news page, it's awesome to say more news, not just more. So we want to be as clear as possible. All right, so now I'm going to go through some kind of common questions that people ask me about, because once I started talking about forms and thinking about forms, it kind of comes to me, so I encourage y'all to do that too afterwards. But somebody would say, Julie, forms, shorter the better, right? And I'd say, totally depends. So much depends on the context, and it doesn't, like studies have shown that long forms are fine as long as the questions are contextual and engaging. So really, it always does come back to research. Or optional versus required. Like, oh, hey, should this form be required, or should this field be required or optional, or what's the deal with that? It's best to mark your optional fields, not your required fields. And I recommend marking your optional fields in parentheses with the words optional in there. This is because not everyone knows what that asterisk means, right? And the required is, like saying something is required is much more harsher than saying optional. Like noting optional is more friendly. And we know someone's there to fill it out, so it's really not necessary to show the required, because they know they have to fill out the fields to get to the next step, right? So marking optional is showing, it's showing that the fields that aren't optional are required. Also, like, let's think about it. Required is really a developer, the required is something that actually goes in the code to make sure someone fills out the form. So this is a design pattern that is being influenced by code for us right now, and we don't need to do that. Like, it's totally fine to just mark optional. All right, so now we've got some interactive time here. So help me chat about what went wrong. Okay, so this one, we've got inline labels, and I can tell you I typed in Durham, North Carolina for my location, and it says location not found. I promise it's a real place. All right, here, my buttons are all out of order. Let's see, like it's not sequential. I'm getting an error message before I submitted, and she's like, I can have a form within a form. It's horribly unorganized. I don't have my content grouped together. Okay, here, I don't know how to close this. Like, I don't see a close button. Like, this is not human. You wouldn't trap someone in real life, would you? Oh, wow, I've got way too many select lists. Let's see, they're not blank. Like, we should really have please select, not everywhere. And the input field, the fields don't match the size of what's in there at all. Also, this is making me do math. If y'all can't read it up there, it says, testing skill test question, 4 plus 10 divided by 5. What? This is crazy. These are real forms, too. This one, I'm not even sure what all went wrong here, but it's just bad. All right, so here we have an example of inline errors that were given on focus. So basically, I just clicked in first name, and then I got this prompt, what's your first name? But already got error messages in all the other fields. I hadn't even filled it out yet. I hadn't even tried, and it was telling me I did it wrong already. Right? It's sad. Okay, so while I just have a couple minutes left, I'm going to do a quick chat about how I kind of feel like the future of form design's going. And I just wanted to put that cat meme in here. Okay, so material design is, as we all know, it's a style, or as you might know, it's a style guide or design trend from Google. It kind of breaks my top align rule that I chatted about in the beginning, but it doesn't really break it because it's an inline label, and when you click in, the label goes above. It's really cool. I think it works great. It's important, though, to test with your users, your user base, to make sure it works for them, and also watch your accessibility contrast ratios, because often I see like a light gray text on a white with material design. Okay, conversational user interfaces. These are the chat bots. Like, this is really just a form in itself. It's a way that the user, or the person, the user, the human, is giving interaction to the company, to the website. It's successful in collecting data, but I mean, it's kind of like, it's somewhere in the cousin of form design, I'd say. Also, voice is a really cool way that we're going to be interacting with sites, brands, and apps in the future to get that same kind of information that one might be filling out in a form. And I can't wait to listen to Mark later today talk about voice. I think in my experience, like usability heuristics still hold true when we're talking about voice UX, but basically I can't wait to see where this goes. All right, so if you forget everything I say, which is totally cool, please remember just these guiding principles, which when you're talking about form design and when you're thinking about your forms, we want to help reduce cognitive load, help prevent errors, and make it human. And when in doubt, be sure to talk to your users. So thank you very much. I appreciate y'all being here.